Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin in about 1 minute. Okay? Okay, we're ready. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 5:30. If everybody would please take a seat and we can start. I'd like to try to keep this on time so we can move along. The Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the media. First notice on Friday, August 18, 2017. The second notice was on Friday, September 1st, 2017. And for the record, today is Friday, September 8th, 2017, and the time now is 5:30 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following. Referral of appointment of Celestial C. Babalta, member, Guam Academy Charter School Council. Term length is 3 years. We have referral of appointment of Lisa J. Provido, position for member, University of Guam Board of Regents, term length of 6 years. We also have bill number 159-34 COR, an act to amend section 6102 of Article 1, Chapter 6, Division 2, Title 17 Guam Code annotated, relative to extending the duty to send children to school from the age of 16 years to the age of 18 years. Bill number 160-34, an act to amend subsection 1, parenthesis 13 of section 715, chapter 7 of Title 1, Guam Code annotated, relative to converting the 180 instructional days required each school year by the Department of Education to 1,260 instructional hours. Joining me for this public hearing is Speaker B.J. Cruz, Vice Speaker Senator Therese Terlai, and my Vice Chair, Senator Will Castro. General rules for public hearing. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of sign up on the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislature staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony shall be confined to the substance or the nature of the nominee's appointment or the bill. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired by the members of the panel. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will start with stating your name. We will now begin public testimony on Mr. Celestial Babalta, and the individual that signed up was Maria Gutierrez. Ms. Gutierrez, would you like to come forward, please? Celestial. Oh, it's Celestial. Yeah. And I'll also ask Ms. Lisa Provido and Mr. Elvin Chiang to come forward also, and because you'll be providing oral testimony after we're done with Ms. Gutierrez for Mr. Babalta. Okay. Ms. Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, Senator San Agustin, Speaker Cruz, Vice Speaker Terlahi, Senator Castro. Good afternoon. I didn't really know that the nomination of Mr. Celestino Babalta is on the schedule today, and but I am very happy to present an oral testimony in support of Mr. Celestino Babalta Mr. Babauta and I served during the Territorial Board of Education, and this is many years ago. And I know that he will provide the best service being a member on the Charter School Council. Unfortunately, I would have been pushing him to run for the Guam Education Board, and he always gives me the smile. But I know Mr. Babauta, so Senators, I fully endorse and support the nomination of Mr. Celestino Babauta, and I hope that the whole body will confirm him in your next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Staff, could you check is Mr. Babauta outside so we can continue on? And if not, then we'll proceed to, unless any of the, I'd like to also recognize Senator Talina Nelson's also joined us. Okay, I don't think I have any questions for you, Ms. Gutierrez.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to also recognize that for Ms. Provido, we have the President of the University of Guam, Dr. Robert Underwood, is in support. He has written testimony. We have also I like this when they wrote down maybe. I don't know why maybe. You want to speak or you don't, but that's okay. We got let me see. We have Elizabeth, Gail, that was you, right? Maybe you want to speak, right, for Lisa? Okay, no problem. And Maria Flor Herrero? Ma'am, would you want to speak orally? Okay. And we also, okay, we have other individuals that are identified here that are here in support. They've got David Tan in support, no oral testimony. We have Maria Elizabeth Christie. You're here in support of Lisa also, okay. And we have Bernie, God, I can't, is there a Bernie here? I couldn't understand your last name. Schumann? Okay, it just looks SCH. But anyway, we'll begin with first you, Miss Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman and Senator Agustin, Senators Castro, Vice Speaker Terlahi, and Senator Nelson, and Speaker Cruz. I just wanted to take a few minutes just give you, I guess, a little personal background about myself. First, this is just really a privilege for me to have been nominated for one of the most highly regarded and highly esteemed board, the University of Guam Board of Regents, and I hope that I can give my best effort and to serve the greater good of our community. But anyway, just to let you know, I was born and raised here in Guam, and I was the daughter of Filipino immigrants. When we were kids, my father would always stress on us the importance of hard work and remind us of his humble beginnings, from rags to riches stories, and he always had the quiet expectation that we would always be better off than him. So he's not here today, and it would have been really a proud moment for him if he had been here to witness my confirmation hearing. But instead, my mother is here, and I'm so glad that she's able to attend, as well as my family and friends. And so I was a graduate of the Academy from 1980. After that, I had gone on to college, attended the Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, where I obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture degree. And after that, I went on and pursued a Master's of Architecture at the University of Pennsylvania. And it would my education at Penn would just not have been possible if it were not for a professional technical scholarship that I had received. And so ever since then, I had been just extremely grateful for having had that opportunity. You know, the degree actually has been so much worth more to me than the $27,000 that was initially invested at that time. And I know today it just seems like a small sum, but back then it was really a big fortune. And it opened a lot of doors for me, new opportunities, personally as well as professionally, and I've been really rewarded with a full life here on Guam, having raised you know, 2 sons with my husband, David Tan, who is also my husband. Well, he's an architect as well, and also my partner in private practice. So it was really challenging to try and balance all those different roles that I had as a mother and career architect. I returned to Guam in 1990 during the Japanese bubble days. And, you know, in a sense, I came back at the right place and at the right time. And I was fortunate enough to have worked for Jack Jones, who had mentored me through my internship years and supported my path to licensure, basically. Even when I left and went on to private practice, he was always there for me. And then eventually, we actually offered him a partnership in our own firm, in our own private practice. And so, in terms of my education as an architect, I'm always indebted to Jack Jones, who actually, at one point when I was an intern with his firm, he had awarded me a project to work on, which happened to be the RFK Library. And that's really where I had gotten my feet wet. And, you know, and I was able to really learn the ropes of my profession at that time. And then at the same time, I also became involved in various civic and professional organizations, such as the local chapter of the American Institute of Architects, Guam and Micronesia chapter, Rotary Club of Guam Sunrise, Guam Historic Preservation Trust and Review Board, and finally the Appeals Board. So service to a board is not new to me, but I feel that joining the Board of Regents, which is an institution of higher learning, would even be a greater honor to just step up once again to serve in the public interest for the greater good of our island community. I think it's a golden opportunity that would merit really my best effort in the spirit of the university's mission, and that is to enlighten, to discover, and to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Previto. We will now proceed to Dr. Underwood. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. Hafade, buenas tardes todos juntos, Speaker Cruz, Senator Castro, Vice Speaker Terlai, and Senator Nelson. This is the Fanutanan semester at the University of Guam. I just wanted to point that out in case everyone, that's a point of conversation. And the next semester is Fanyum Nakan. And as I tell people, you have all of Fanutanan to learn how to pronounce Fanyum Nakan. I want to take time to pay tribute to Lisa Provido here. She has, of course, explained her record and her commitment to the university and her commitment to the tripart mission of the university, and her personal relationship to the island, not only as being born and raised here, but also in terms of giving back professionally as a result of a successful Protect program. And this is all a great intersection of what it means to provide service and give back and to complete your efforts and to be able to serve at this level. And it's also testimony to the continuing efficacy of reform that was instituted a few years ago, which is the creation of the Regent Nominating Committee. And the Regent Nominating Committee entertains applicants who want to serve as members of the Board of Regents, and based on that, 3 names are then nominated to the governor. And so she was nominated with 2 other individuals, and the governor has selected her. And any one of them would have been best, but you know, she's the best of the 3. I can say that now. I couldn't say that before. But the efficacy of that, and I think Regent Mariflor Herrero is the board member on that, is really proven by the quality and the commitment that we have at the University of Guam via a very committed and very energetic Board of Regents. And so as we go through this process, she is, you know, her qualifications speak for themselves. She's a professional person who has devoted many years, 25 years of professional service, has served in boards and commissions before, you know, is honored at her high school, the Academy of Our Lady, went to some very good institutions. She didn't go to UOG, but she went to other similarly excellent institutions. So, but all that kidding aside, we certainly urge your quick action on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will now move to Mr. Chiang, right? Am I correct?
My name is Alvin Chan of Tamuning, a CPA and a member of the Board of Regents of UOG. Honorable Chairman St. Augustine and honorable committee members, you have already heard from our president said so much about Ms. Liz Porredo, but here's my version anyway. I'm here to support the nomination of Ms. Liz Porredo to the Board of Regents of University of Guam. As you know, university has a sizable campus with vast physical facilities which require continuing upkeeping, maintenance, and it currently also has a major expansion plan. Therefore, it is important for a member of the Board of Regents to possess the expertise in such areas. Ms. Porredo graduated from the renowned University of Pennsylvania and has many years of working experience as an architect. She is already very busy with other community services, so her willingness to serve as a member of the Board of Regents is truly a blessing to the university. I wholeheartedly support her nomination, and your kind consideration will be deeply appreciated. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Now, Ms. Gale.
Yes.
Correct?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hafaday, Senator St. Augustine, and fellow members of the committee. I hereby fully support the nomination of Ms. Lisa Porredo to the University of Guam Board of Regents. I know Lisa has a deep commitment to quality of education for Guam and Micronesian residents. Serving on the UOG Board of Regents will allow her to pass her knowledge, expertise, and wisdom, giving back to the Guam community in which she was raised. I have had the pleasure of knowing Lisa since high school at the Academy of Our Lady. She graduated with my older sister, and I was classmates with her younger sister. Lisa and I happen to also be licensed and sworn as professionals in our respective fields on the same date in 1990. We were at the same swearing-in ceremony. Because we are 2 of the very few women in the architecture engineering industry on Guam, we find ourselves serving on many of the same committees and boards. And I feel Lisa brings an expertise and wealth of knowledge that is necessary to the University of Guam Board of Regents. The UOG's physical plant and facilities play a vital role, an important role, in providing quality education and resources at the university. Lisa will bring a high-valued skill set with her when she is serving on the Board of Regents. I served with Lisa on the Guam Board of Registration for Professional Engineers, Architects, and Land Surveyors, or the PEALS Board. She is always thorough in her research, meticulous in her review of applicants and issues, and professional in her leadership. As a registered architect, she will bring again a wealth of knowledge about construction materials, building code, sustainable design, and energy efficiency as the board makes future physical planning decisions. As an architect, she is sensitive to and educated in historic preservation and physical master planning. In her capacity as the chairperson of the Guam Appeals Board, Lisa guided and led the board through intense scrutiny by the Office of Public Accountability, while still ensuring that application review and other appeals board matters continued. Her professionalism and leadership are commendable and always above board. As a current member of the UOG Board of Regents, I look forward to working with Lisa once again to ensure our University of Guam stays on its mission to go from good to great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gale. Now we'll have Mrs. Bernie Sham. Your name is? Mariflor? Oh, Mariflor Herrero. Oh, okay. If you can just press the mic, ma'am, so we can hear you. There you go. Oh, go ahead.
So, good afternoon, Senator San Agustin and members of the committee. My name is Mariflor Herrero, and I am a member of the Board of Regents of the University of Guam. And as the President said, I am chairing the nominating committee. So actually my job is to seek candidates to be members of the Board of Regents, and they have to be competent, and they have to be the type of person that would really be a good asset for the university. And of course, Guam in general, because really, I mean, we are talking about the education of our youngsters. So when her name was referred to me, I didn't know her personally, but I did know her sister, which I believe is here today, and I know that she is a wonderful person. So I thought if Lisa is just like her, that would be very nice. So I called her up, and when I mentioned to her what I was calling her for, her answer was, oh, sure, I would be delighted to serve. I mean, she really wants to give and to serve and to do as much as she can. So then she presented her resume, and she filled up all the requirements for the application. And then I presented to the rest of my board and the nominating committee, and we really were impressed with her resume. I mean, she's the president of her company, as an architectural firm. She's a lady, and this is mostly a field that is dominated by male individuals, so I look at it as an accomplishment. Her expertise are in architectural design, sustainable design, residential and interior design, and as my fellow board member here said, the University of Guam is going through a lot of buildings, and her expertise would be very valuable for the board. And also, I was very impressed by the letters of recommendation that she brought and what people had to say about her. She's not only an accomplished individual, but she's also very humble. And she does serve in and donate of her times in other boards, like the Board of Engineers. And I know that she's also active in the Catholic Church, the Munin Parish. And therefore, I'm here to support her because I really think that she would be a great asset for UOG.
Thank you. We will now begin with Speaker Cruz. Do you have anything? Nothing? No, Bernie, was Ms. Herrera. Madam Vice Speaker, would you have any questions you want to?
Just want to thank you, Lisa and I were at Academy together, same with Betty and Bernie and Kiwi. But yes, want to thank you for your service. I noticed it's a 6-year term. Are you aware of that? Quite a long term. So, and thank you all for serving on that, the Board of Regents as well, Mr. Chang and Mariflor. And I know that the requirement to be on this Board of Regents says it's you're supposed to be expert in your field, or it's that expertise that they're looking for on the board. And is there any issue, Dr. Underwood, to have two, or Mayor Flor to have two architects? Is that okay? I mean, it's great probably with the work that you're going through, but yeah.
Just to clarify, I'm not an architect, I'm an engineer.
Engineer, okay, then my fault. Great, perfect, good combination. Thank you, that's right. Okay, great. All right, yeah, I just wanted to commend you and thank you again for, it's a big service you're going to be doing. I know that they're very professional, the board, when they conduct meetings, they have retreats, so it's a lot of time and dedicated effort that you're going to have to put into. Thank you. Still smiles.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to congratulate you both on your nomination. I just want to share that to see your resume and to know a little bit of the adversity you have to face, especially in your career field, it's truly an inspiration. Unfortunately, I met you this way, but I know that as individuals, you are of exceptional character, and I know that you will bring a lot of worth to the Board of Regents. So thank you for, offering your service, especially for a lot of us younger generations to guide us through our most adverse times. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Castro.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to comment that the nominee, Ms. Provito, has an impressive dossier, very impressive history of achievement, service to the community, a great education. The Ivy League credential certainly brings additional value. And the supporting testimony from individuals I deeply respect and whom I've known for many years, it helps. And if your brother's a reflection of you, then he's a fine character, speaks to your character as well. But I was most moved, Mr. Chair, by Ms. Gale's written testimony in affirmation of Ms. Provito's love and concern for not just the people of Guam, but the folks from the region. Since being, granted the privilege to serve in the 34th, I've always very strongly held that in order to lift up this island, we've got to do it not just with those who make Guam their home, but with our brothers and sisters from throughout the region. So thank you so much for being regionally minded and inclusive. And so I look forward to your confirmation and congratulations.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Ms. Lisa Provito, I looked over your dossier, and you know what? Sometimes I wish when I look at, you have a CPA here, you got an engineer here, and you got an architect here. There should have been one good board for the government of Guam so that we can get our numbers right, get our roads corrected, get our buildings correct. But you know what? Thank God it's going to be at the University of Guam. And I thank you for accepting the nomination, Lisa. And I look forward to your confirmation, hopefully by the end of the month, if we have session. All right?
Can I add one more thing? It occurred to me when President Underwood was speaking. So Lisa was born and raised on Guam. Her father came to Guam as a Camp Rojas person from the Philippines. So she's kind of the equivalent of what a DACA is, or the issue that we're having right now. And she wants to contribute back to Guam. She's contributing to the brain depth of Guam, and she's not Chamorro.
And there's no problem. She's not going anywhere. She's born and raised in Guam, so we'll just work with Lisa. Lisa, would you like to say anything beyond this? Other than that, we'll be done with your confirmation.
Well, it took a long time to figure out what my identity was. And I feel like I've been, actually, just in the past few years when actually my sister had spearheaded a Camp Rojas documentary. And that's when we really started to come to terms with our roots and our real ethnic identity. And, because growing up, face it, we were really Guamanians. We didn't understand the language of my mother and father. We had really not much appreciation for that. And we were the fast food generation. But I think after going off-island and going through college, coming back, you really start to learn an appreciation for your own culture. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Provito. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. By Tuesday, it'll end. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Augustine at gmail.com. My office is located at Rand Care Building, second floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam, 96931. And that will end for the nominees. Thank you, Ms. Provito. And we will now proceed on to Bill number 159-34. Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue. Please, Dr. Underwood, thank you, Dr. Underwood. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to Bill number 159-34, an act to amend Section 6102 of Article 1, Chapter 6, Division 2, Title 17, Guam Code Annotated, relative to extending the duty to send children to school from age 16 to the age of 18. I have here listed, let me see, I have written testimony from Sanjay, the president of GFT. Would you like to speak, sir? Would you be, okay, please come forward. Before you all fill up the table, let me call them up, okay, so we make sure we have enough room for everybody. I have Robert Crisostomo, board member. I see everybody in the front, but they only mark support. I guess you're all giving oral testimony, right? Okay. But we will start with Mr. Sanjay. First one that signed up. Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Senator San Augustine and senators. Bill 159, to extend the duty to send children to school from age 16 to 18, is supported by Guam Federation of Teachers. GFT agrees that children who are 16 years of age are too young to make choices that prematurely end their years in school, which will lead to lower paying jobs. With the building of Ukuru and Tizon high schools, I believe the Guam Department of Education may be able to accommodate the number of students in terms of classroom space availability. However, I am concerned with the amount of teachers, textbooks, and other resources needed to continue servicing our students. Children who enter high school this year are using textbooks that were last purchased on their year of birth. I urge you and the other senators to continue prioritizing the financial needs of DOE. Our students who have the potential to be the smartest and best students within the nation need the support and encouragement to be at their best. Let us expect the best out of our children, and let us also provide the best quality of resources to support our children. GFT recommends that this bill explicitly state that students who graduate from high school, receive their GED, or receive an exemption from school by the superintendent be exempted from staying in school until the age of 18. And I do have other language if you wanted me to speak on Bill 160, or I can wait for that.
We'll wait for that. We'll just stay with 159 first.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanjay. Just turn off the mic. We have Mr. Robert Crisosmo. Sir.
Good afternoon, Senator Agustin and members of the committee. My name is Robert Crisosmo. I'm here as an appointed board member and here to support Bill 159. I'd also like to qualify my support of 159 with several conditions, and I'd like to tie the driver's license. As you know, 16 is the age that most students get their driver's license. And Senator, you're looking at me like it's not germane to the, but I will explain where I'm going with this. The driver's license is like a rite of passage to every 16-year-old, and it's one thing they look forward to getting, and they don't look at the graduation diploma as the end state of high school. Most of their time is biding time to get that driver's license. My recommendation, and I hope it's considered seriously, because several states have adopted this practice of no pass, no drive, is to tie at 16, you can get your driver's license on condition that at 18, if you graduate, or even before then, you get your full license and the full privilege of a license as an adult. So 159 is a great initiative. I just like to tie in the driver's license because kids nowadays consider the driver's license as more important than that diploma. We've got to change that paradigm and that thinking. And the end state of high school should be the achievement of that diploma, not that driver's license. Once a kid gets his driver's license, he looks at getting a job, and therefore dropout seems like a pretty good idea at that time. You don't graduate, you don't drive. You don't pass, you don't drive. So please take that under consideration as the bill moves forward to law. If it's not germane to this topic, maybe at a different time, at a different venue and consideration, another bill can be considered, Senator, under such circumstances. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crisosmo. Ms. Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Maria A. Gutierrez. I'm the Vice Chair of the Guam Education Board. And thank you, Senator, for coming to the work session when the board members, so that you can hear our concern and our position. So what I do is there is a testimony that it will be read out by the superintendent, but the board have joined together in this testimony, so I leave that. But yes, as a private citizen too, I support Bill 159-34, and just the same as what Board Member Crisostomo just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Mr. Ada, Chairman.
Good afternoon, Senator Agustin, Speaker P.J. Cruz, Vice Speaker Terlahi, and Senator Castro. With me here also, in addition to Mrs. Gutierrez and Mr. Crisostomo, is the Superintendent of Education and his deputy, Mr. Sanchez. And although I do have a comment, I would like to defer and allow the superintendent to speak first before I do make my comment. Kindly allow.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fernandez, Superintendent.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You should have a copy of the written testimony in hand, and I understand we have 5 minutes to get all these points in. The testimony you have addresses both 159 and 160, so what I'll do is I'll just focus on 159 for now, as the other members of the panel have done as well. First of all, we do want to just thank you for, and the authors of the bill for, generating these ideas and approaching us as the board. Mr. Chair, you sat in on our work session and came to hear some of the board's discussion earlier when we sat down with the bills and wanted to go over some of the issues. With regard to Bill 159-34, which raises the compulsory age for attendance in school, we recognize, of course, that the intent of the legislation is a good one, in line with ensuring that all of our students receive a high school diploma and thereafter have better opportunities to obtain good jobs and their college degrees. And the Guam Department of Education obviously shares those goals. If we can get 100% of our students to graduate on time, ready for college and career, it'll be a much better future for our students and our island. Currently, we graduate between 1,800 and 2,000 high school students each year, resulting in an annual adjusted cohort graduation rate of 76.1%, which was at the end of this 2016-17 school year. Dropout statistics show that over the past 5 years, an average of 372 students aged 16 and over have dropped out annually, although the number has fallen to around 225 students for this past school year, which is a dropout rate of 2.8%. But again, over the past 5 years, that number has been higher, averaging 372. So while we do support students staying in school, we do want to make sure that we are aware of any resources that may be needed to ensure there are adequate facilities, teachers, staff, classroom resources to serve these students. We would like to believe that the large majority of students who are leaving the system are not leaving because of some insignificant reason, or are not being pushed or necessarily encouraged to leave by those in our school system. Students, like all of us, face challenges at home and in our community, and I believe we can help them overcome these challenges and remain in school. Well, if we do so, they can improve the trajectory of their life outcomes. Raising the compulsory age not only emphasizes greater responsibility for the parents and guardians, which is important, it also raises expectations for us as school leaders and school communities. So if we are to ensure that the students who are required to stay in school are going to be able to succeed, we need to address the underlying issues as well. We know that many of our students drop out because they struggle with school. We know they drop out because they need to take care of sick relatives or handle other significant family responsibilities, including going to work to earn or to support their parents or siblings. We know that other issues at home or in their community can make it difficult for students to stay the course and stay in school. By requiring the students to stay in school for an additional 2 years, it won't make these issues go away. And so the point we want to make is that we don't want to raise the compulsory age to 18 if it means that we are simply becoming a way station for additional 2 years for these students. It is our goal to develop better ways right now for those students who we currently serve to identify those students in need of support much earlier in their educational years. In high schools, we have looked at different ways, such as through our freshman academies, to try to get new high school students adjusted to the more rigorous and academic and behavioral expectations of high school. We have seen success but hope to expand participation in career and technical programs, college preparatory coursework, and college and career preparation overall. And we are looking at better ways to assist with credit recovery for those students who have fallen a year or two behind through offering night school, summer school, and opportunities to enroll at JP Torres Success Academy as an example. So I think, as we look at this, and we've had this discussion, if the compulsory age were to be raised, our first focus is not going to be trying to keep them out. It's going to be looking at whether or not we're able to support them and support especially those students who dropped out or who are potentially going to drop out because they're failing, trying to find a way to make sure that they succeed. The structure of the bill also continues to impose direct responsibility on parents and guardians. It is important that we understand the issues associated with this responsibility as well as the penalties. I mean, currently a $50 fine is what is in the law to ensure compliance for a first offense, and then afterwards it looks to charge parents and guardians with petty misdemeanors if they fail to comply. So we really do need to look at whether those are adequate consequences and whether there is more that we can do to ensure, as the law currently requires, that parents and guardians are brought into this framework in a way that they can help these students get to school, stay in school, and get their diplomas. So, it doesn't look like the change itself addresses any additional responsibilities for the parents, but it looks like that continues to be its aim. Finally, when we discussed this bill with our board, as you heard from Mr. Crisostomo, there was discussion about creating motivation and incentive for students to finish school. One way to do this, as piloted in a number of states, would be to consider and enact a no-pass, no-drive law that ties driving privileges to some type of student performance, which could include staying in school, among other factors. So I think there are about 27, 28 states that currently have some version of a no-pass, no-drive law. And it enables the students to go ahead and seek their driver's permit or their driver's license, but it really involves the school certifying their performance in whatever the factor might be. So it might be attendance, it might be looking at completion of courses, and so forth. So there are models out there should the legislature want to continue that research. Again, just in wrapping up, the bill is a good start, and we support the intent to get these students to finish high school and get their diploma. Should it move forward, we want to work with you to develop an analysis of the resources that might be needed to make this initiative successful, and to look at the timing for any such implementation to ensure that we're prepared should this become the law of the land. So with that, Chairman San Agustin, that's our testimony on Bill 159.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sanchez, you plan on speaking, or the superintendent took care of that, right?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, now your shot.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me commend you for your innovative thought on Bill 159. I'd like to see the guidance counselors of these schools, high schools, that if there is already inkling that a child may be dropping out of school, that they intervene with the child. And oftentimes, Mr. Chair and Senators, these kids are doing things on their own, and the parents are totally unaware that this was happening. So I would like to see that the guidance counselor be able to bring the child in, the student in, and the parents or the guardian, and offer them alternatives. I'd like to really see that, such as the night school, Asmujo. There's also JP Torres as a possibility. I really see oftentimes, and I'm being redundant here, that parents are often caught off guard. It is true that if a child, for some odd and strange reasons, such as medical issues, we can encourage that child, stay in school, and we will work with you. And the principals have worked with those circumstances, but if you don't let the school know what your circumstances is, it will be very difficult to read anybody's mind. I am still kind of battling with certain issues on the legislation, because I really would like to see, as the superintendent alluded, additional classrooms, teachers, funding, requested and needed. That's my testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I call anybody else and replace the panel that's in the, I'd ask my colleagues. Senator, no? Madam Vice, do you have anything you want to?
Right now, with the current policy where it's mandatory to 16, optional to 18, you're able right now to get those other programs that you described to help, right? The guidance counselors to step in and find solutions. All right. Do you think, is there an issue getting them in to that counselor or something like that if they're not mandated to? Or that's not the issue?
No, I think the issue is there's a lot of work in progress, right? And so what we recognize is there's a lot of work in progress, a lot of good work and a lot of progress that we made to try to make that connection between our high school students and then getting out into a viable, post-secondary opportunity. And that's going on with the students we have now. So I think the biggest concern is making sure that if you're taking a student who would otherwise have dropped out, it's important for us to go back into our data and really try to pull out some of those reasons, like why exactly did they drop out, right? So our dropout statistics catch a lot of different information, including students who just don't show up after enrollment. They get dropped, they get counted in that dropout. But we're also talking about students who drop out because of because they're failing, because whatever supports they've had in school has not worked. They get older, they don't want to be in with freshmen. These are the students that you kind of see right now at sort of the Success Academy, that credit recovery piece. So there are students like that who are in our school system now, and definitely those who have left the school system who want back in. Right now, for instance, with JP Torres, we can only serve like 200 students, but we know there's a lot more demand, and it concerns us, of course, and we want to tackle that. We're just saying that, if the students that we're keeping in and mandating to stay in have more of the similar characteristics, we better be sure that we are prepared to provide, these different ways to get to your diploma, so that we're helping you not just stay in school longer, but finding a way to turn your high school career around. So, the things about the counselors, we need to do a better job in many different areas, and we're trying to. The only issue is that as you add more students, and maybe those who, for some reason, were in high school and found it to be dysfunctional and not serving their purposes, it's going to be an extra level of how do we make sure we account for them too.
Senator Castro, do you have anything you wanted to? Nothing? Well, Mr. Superintendent, thank you for you marked support, but I know you made some comments. Just looking at your letter of support, if you remember correctly, when we were talking about at the work session, we talked about number one, the Guam Legislature provides you funding every year in your annual budget. It includes, 31,000 kids? And we also discussed the issue about that in order to be established as a student that officially drops out is 25 days. Am I correct? I think that was you that brought that up, Mr. Sanchez. But it was identified that 25 days when you're officially dropped from school. And I think Mr. Crisosmo was very concerned about that. And I asked the question, after the third day, what intervention has the department done? And I really didn't get an answer. I don't know what the intervention is, but it's quite evident that if a student reaches 25 days of missing school, there's something missing there. And that's something that you and management, Mr. Superintendent, need to look at and fix it. Because when we go to the budget process and we talk about providing you funds, it's to capture all the students. As you've already advised on the letter, it was 372, now it's down to 225 students. I know we don't give you everything you want when you ask for 326 million, but when we give you what we can give you, it's also to educate all the students that are listed, the total population. But when you start missing students, I'm just wondering, where did the money go that we gave you for the year? Because it's not going to Asmujao, it's not going to GCC to help the adult education program. It's not going anywhere, okay? And just moving down the letter, you asked for, it's not going to create a way station. At no point does this bill create a way station. This is about addressing our students on Guam. Keep them off the street, get an education for the students, okay? That's all it's all about. Moving along, when's the last time any parent's been fined $50? I don't think at all, right? So, because there's a compulsory age, are we going to say that's the legislature's responsibility to fine them? Because as I talked to Dr. Ron McNitch tonight, he offered that maybe we should convert that and change that in the bill to make it maybe community service, so that the parents have to perform community service at the school when the child doesn't come in. See, what the bill is all about is about addressing the shortfalls of the students. Because I remember when I spoke to Mrs. Sanjay, president of GFT, before, when they first introduced this bill, there wasn't enough schools. Now there's enough schools. Maybe not as big, but there's more than enough schools. Okay? So I would just be, I thank you for your testimony. And yes, we will try to find you more money.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
I just want to make sure of that.
No, I mean, I think what I want to just respond is, and this is, it's it's not necessarily only resource driven. I think the issue is our efforts right now are, without the mandatory compulsory law, is to prevent these kids from dropping out. We're trying to reduce the numbers who drop out, and then on the compulsory side, making sure they stay in. So I think the issue for us is continuing the improvements. So, back in school year 11-12, the number was a high of 628 students that dropped out. I can provide this. It was just generated with updated numbers today. 628 from school year 11-12 who dropped out. In 15-16, it was 245, and then school year 16-17, it was 225. So hopefully we're not talking about a lot of numbers. It's different when you're talking about 600 students versus 200. And then the second thing, as you mentioned about absences, what I'm glad and will produce this is that, like you said, are these excessive absences becoming the issue? In school year 12-13, the high was 302 students who were dropped for that reason. In 15-16, it was 30, and last year it was 1. So we are taking the initiative to ensure that the absences are not resulting in, the students dropping out for good. So right now it looks like there are two big issues right now for the 225 this last year. 109, we can ask for more detail, but these are just no-shows after enrollment. So that doesn't seem to be a major concern. And the others are the 110 who voluntarily withdraw. Those are the 110 we want to figure out, why are they withdrawing? What is it that's pulling them away from school? And if those are the numbers we're talking about, then it might be, obviously more feasible, but, versus 630. So as we work to improve and reduce the numbers of students who want to drop out, that helps us in this effort, so it doesn't become merely trying to keep a crowd of students in.
Okay, thank you. And on your part, Mr. Crisostomo, little research, over 27 states have no pass, no drive. If our legal folks says it's not germane, then I'll introduce a bill to add that, to change the law, introduce the bill to try to change the law on the driver's license part, to add it on. If that's what it takes, then hopefully folks will come in and testify that if you don't go to school, you don't get your permit, you don't stay in school, you don't get your intermediate until you turn 18, then, you do whatever you want to do because you're an adult. Okay? Madam Vice?
Yes, I'm wondering, I guess, did the board decide that they prefer the no pass, no drive as opposed to this bill, to mandatory 18?
If I may, they can speak for themselves. I'm just saying it was brought up as part of this discussion as a supplement.
Or
to this in some form or fashion. I think as the idea was that, the reason that a motivational, incentive for kids might be to be able to tie your driver's license to completing school.
Right.
But I think we said there's further research is probably needed, knowing that there's a lot of models out there, but they're not all the same. So if that's the direction, then we would be happy to go and also join in that research.
Yeah, because they're very different. One is incentive, like you said, motivational versus mandatory. And so that's why I was wondering, what's the board's position? You want both, or you want the incentive one instead?
So I think that would probably take for further action, because I think we discussed it in a work session, but the board has not convened to take a position on that particular bill.
Could I just ask another question of GFT? You read a provision there that you were recommending as an amendment. Can you read that part one more time?
Sure, and I'll gladly give you a copy of this as well. Let's see.
Like at the end of the...
Right. Students who graduate from high school, receive their GED, or receive an exemption from the school by the superintendent, be exempt from staying in school until the age of 18. The current exemptions, I believe, that are in law speak to the time when you begin school at age 5, but I don't think there's any exemptions given for staying until graduation.
Yes, that's what we discussed, that we'll make the amendment, that if you graduate before 18, you don't need to be in school up to 18. If you unfortunately end up dropping out of school, but you're able to go to the adult education up at GC and get a GED, I think we'll need to amend that on the bill.
And we forgot to add that as well. But yes, there are some students who graduated 3 years, so at Southern High.
That's
so
correct.
we definitely do not need to force them to go another year if they're able to go on to college.
That's correct. Yes. No further question for the panel here. I'd like to also, you may be excused, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to also recognize that we do have some folks that have signed up as opposing. I don't know if you want to speak, but I'll go ahead and just recognize them. We have Rebecca North, am I correct? As opposing? Okay. We have Leilani Cruz as opposing. Okay. And we have Hani Sabangan. Okay. I hope I don't murder your last name, okay? Please, I apologize. And B. Adamar. If any of the folks, the ladies, if you sign up to oppose, if you want to speak, please feel free to come up. We would welcome your, and if you don't want, we will entertain your opposing. No? You would, no? What I would say would be funding. We want to make it, that this is for the record, and if I'm correct, you are Ms. Rebecca North.
Yes.
Okay, you turn on
and
mic. Thank
my point has been covered, I think, is funding. If we're having more students in school longer, we need the funding. And sometimes some of these students might be leaving school because they don't get those extra services of a counselor, because some of our counselors at the high school are super overworked. I'm not sure that we have enough counselors really at the high school level that we should to catch these students before they leave the system. And as Mr. Sanjay said, you know, we've got books that are so old, you know, if we're not going to be able to say we're willing to fund what's needed to keep these students in a viable education, it's kind of hard to force them to stay. And then the other question, of course, was the one that you talked about, which is, what if students finish and they're ready to graduate, not wanting to stay? So those were the main reasons I would oppose it. So,
Thank you, Ms. North. I think that's all we have for bill number 159-34. I ask that the committee will continue to receive testimonies for the next few days by Tuesday. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Augustine at gmail.com. My office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. We will now continue on with bill number 160-34. And that is an act to amend subsection 1, parenthesis 1, parenthesis 13 of 1715, chapter 7 of Title 1, Guam Code annotated, relative to converting the 180 instructional days required each school year by the Department of Education to 1,260 instructional hours. Ooh, we have a lot of people signed up. Okay, we'll start with Senator Kliski. Could you please come forward? We have Kathleen Uggan opposing also. Please come forward. Opposing, oral and written. Okay. We have Sanjay. Did the GFT president run? Oh. Come on up, Sanjay. We have, you know, I have nobody else listed as wanting to speak orally. Is there anybody else that, Mr. Superintendent, please come forward? Let me see. Did anybody else signed up but didn't mark to speak? That want to speak? Ms. Gutierrez? Okay. before I start to receive testimony, let me please advise everybody on the panel and the people. The hours that is identified on the bill, the 1,260 hours, the hours came from DOE. And it was clarified that it shouldn't have been 7 times 180 days. It should have been 5 hours times 180 days. And I have offered to them that I will amend the bill to reflect the 180 days will be equivalent to 900 hours, which is what they've advised me from elementary to middle and high, that there's only 5 hours a day instructional time that's being provided by the teachers. Okay, so now we'll begin. Senator Kliski, sir, and I have your thick document.
Is this about signs? Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, sir.
Honorable Senator Joe San Augustine and members of the Committee on Education, I'm going to present some testimony here that suggests that proper assignment of school hours, attendance, and the labor force is more than a matter of long division. I start out with the law. We have 48 U.S.C. 1421G that says the government of Guam shall provide an adequate public education system, and to that end shall establish, maintain, and operate public schools. Public Law 2845, also known as the Every Child Act, implements that section of the Organic Act, and it says that the legislature finds that the Organic Act requires the government of Guam to provide an adequate system of public education. The Organic Act Bill of Rights mandates compulsory education for children between 6 and 16. The interplay of these provisions creates a right to an adequate public education for children that is analogous to a constitutional civil right. This act recognizes the civil right and gives children the access to the courts to vindicate that right, with a parent of a child empowered to conduct litigation on behalf of the child. I suggest, Mr. Chairman, that is the litmus by which many of these provisions should be tested. 1 GCA, Section 715, either L or 13, depending on what you're looking at, a local law tells us that an adequate public education means public schools which at the minimum provide at least 180 instructional days each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. That was the bill as enacted, the Every Child Act. Bill 69-33, which became public law, I think 33-31, changed that, and it said at least 180 instructional days or its equivalents, doesn't read right, including make-up days each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. Scheduled Easter and Christmas breaks shall not be included in make-up days. I think what they mean there is that you can't have a make-up day during those vacations. It's not what it says, but I think that's what they meant. So that's the current state of the law right now, Mr. Chairman, and I've sent out a portion of an op-ed piece that I submitted to the Daily News when this bill was under construction. As you were under consideration, and it says in pertinent part, Respicio's bill changes the definition of an adequate education, an adequate public education, by saying that scheduled Easter and Christmas breaks shall not be included in make-up days. So what that means is then if for some reason the Board of Education would schedule a make-up day during Easter vacation, any child in the system would be able to sue to enjoin that. Now, I can understand, not want to interrupt the vacation, et cetera, But is this really something that is analogous to a constitutional right, not having a make-up day and Easter vacation? In other words, this is a standard, and I've attached the 14 points to this bill, the 14 standards in the Adequate Education Act. And this was tinkering or tampering with something that should have never been touched. It's not an operational provision, it is a standard, 180 days. And again, I confess error because I wasn't aggressive enough when this came up. I couldn't imagine that the legislature would pass such a thing, but I was wrong, Mr. Chairman. I was dead wrong. I probably should quit right there, huh? The Board of Education, and when it comes to fractional days, okay, school starts on time, and halfway through the school day, we lose power, we lose water, there's a storm, whatever. We can't finish the day. So let's call that a fractional day. The Board of Education probably already has the authority to deal with fractional days, since 17 GCA 3102.1 says that the Board of Education at K is to establish a school calendar. So in the process of if you can establish a school calendar, you can amend a school calendar. You can fix it, you can adjust it. So if the first day of school was rained out or drowned out by a typhoon, then the Board of Education could do a new calendar. And if they didn't want to schedule a school day during Easter vacation, they wouldn't have to. But we have a Board of Education. Then moving on from that, now that's dealing with instructional time and fractional days of instructional time. Now, instruction does not take place automatically. You have to have teachers, principals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to have instructional time. Well, the instructional time set out in the Every Child Act does not govern the workday of teachers. If you look at 4 GCA 6212, you see that the government of Guam operates on a 2,080-hour year. Now, since the very beginning, probably of the public school system, the school calendar does not require teachers to be in the classroom for 2,080 hours a year. So what we've had for all of this time is trying to stuff 10 pounds of groceries in a 5-pound sack. But it kind of works, and we've kind of gotten along with it, and no one has really had too much grief over it. But once you start converting hours to minutes, you know, I was even going to convert it down to seconds, but I need a bigger calculator. My calculator won't deal with those large numbers. So government of Guam employees work for 2,080 hours a year. So if we're going to start dealing with these things, we ought to deal with all of these things, and we ought to fix the whole thing so that it works right. Now, our Supreme Court has weighed in on teachers' hours of work in a case called, among other things, Guam Federation of Teachers versus Department of Education and the Civil Service Commission. I've attached a copy of that decision for your late-night reading, Mr. Chairman. And that case arose because it's been, 17 years ago now, in order to accommodate the South Pacific Games, we had to change the start of a school year. And the theory was, well, since you started school 2 weeks late, there was a 2-week furlough, et cetera, so we got to pay teachers for that furlough. Well, that was wrong. It just didn't turn out that way. And this case makes it very clear that that was not the case. And it has a couple of other nuggets in it. It says teachers must fulfill at least 180 instructional days a year and approximately 35 duty hours a week. And it says that absent exigent circumstances such as a natural disaster or real threat of terrorism, the board is limited to delaying the start of the school year such that a total of 360 instructional days are scheduled and available for completion over a course of 1,095 days. So the Supreme Court has addressed what a school year is. The Supreme Court has talked about the hours of instruction. The Supreme Court has at least tacitly acknowledged that the 20-80 hours thing doesn't work in the Department of Education. So taking all those things into consideration, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, I got some really snazzy footnotes here at the end of this testimony. Some of the calculations that I went through myself, for example, if we were operating on a 2,080-hour year, that would be 7,488 seconds. But I don't know if we need to get that precise in this particular calculation. Going on, I do have some recommendations, Mr. Chairman, so that we could do two things. One, we could come up with a system for dealing with fractional days, because your bill, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, has a long division set out, but it doesn't say who's going to do the calculation. So under your bill, would it be the principal? Would it be the superintendent? Would it be the Board of Education? Perhaps the president of GFT? The possibilities are endless. So I think in order for this to work, there has to be a definitive statement as to who's going to do the calculation. But here are my recommendations. Have a grain of salt handy, Mr. Chairman. Return 1 GCA 715L13 to its original state. So it's just a standard, not an operating statute, so that it reads at least 180 instructional days each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. Taking it back to being a standard. Now, if you want to deal with the operations of the Department of Education, notice that the standards, the 14 points, are in 1 GCA. That's general provisions that apply to the entire government. So under the Act, you know, I hope nobody from the waterworks is here, but if you don't have water at a school, they have a responsibility under that Act to make sure that there's water. And the same with power and so on. That's why the Act, the Every Child Has Act is in 1 GCA. Now, when it comes to operation of the schools, 17 GCA deals with education. Chapter C, as you were, maybe not Chapter C, I got to think about that. 3102, Chapter 3100 deals with the operation of the schools. So I would first of all recommend that you return 13 GCA to its original state, at least 180 instructional days each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendar school year. And then, Mr. Chairman, you might want to amend 17 GCA 3102.1K so that it reads that the board has a responsibility to establish a school calendar and, for good cause shown, from time to time, amend or adjust the calendar to take into consideration loss of instructional time for fractional periods of a day or days so as to comply with 1 GCA, section 715L13. As an alternative, in light of the fact that we have the superintendent here with us tonight, as an alternative, you might want to add a subsection Q to 17 GCA section 3103 to allow the superintendent to make the amendment or adjustment. I would also suggest, Mr. Chairman, that a new 4 GCA 6212.1 be added to provide a school calendar that complies with 1 GCA 715L13, that is the Every Child Act, is deemed to be the 2080 hours referenced in 4 GCA 6212 separate. That's a lot of numbers and stuff. But the word deemed means this. It's a nice legal term that means pretend. It's used to create a legal fiction, right? That's what it's for. So if you say that if the board or the superintendent, depending on which way you want to go, sets out its school calendar, is able to make those fractional adjustments, then it is deemed to be operating on that 20-80-hour year, cleaning up something that's needed to be cleaned up for a long, long time. Now, I submit that the recommendations made above would clean up a couple of problems with the current state of law, as well as provide a workable system with which to deal with fractional losses of instructional days. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mrs.
Uggan.
Mrs.
Uggan.
Uggan, Kathleen, right? Okay.
Yes.
Ma'am.
Good evening, Chair, Senator San Agustin, Senator Castro, and of course, Vice Speaker. Good evening to the superintendent and the board members present, along with my fellow teachers. I am an elementary teacher at LBJ Elementary School. So with all due respect, it is my position that what this bill is trying to achieve is already embodied within our adequate public education requirements and exists effectively in its application. So as our good former Senator Klitsky pointed out, that the original 14 points was changed, but I'm going also, I started with, in my written testimony, citation of the law, you know, of the 14 points. So we're particularly looking at the section or subsection 13. It says, in the existing language used, it is clear that the Department of Education may use instructional hours to create the school calendar and as a matter of fact has done this in these past 3 school years. So to change the law now would clearly manifest into something outside of adequate public education. The language of the law already grants the department to provide 180 instructional days, or again, like the good senator pointed out, or its equivalents. That's the language already included in the law. It includes makeup days each school year also. So I believe that the proposed change in the law, as provided in Bills 160, will have the unintended consequence of effectively diminishing the education profession and surely will weaken the definition of adequate public education. Under Section 1 of the Bill 160, there is a very disheartening example as justification because the language reads, at times, due to a safety concern, students are removed from a school building for only an hour or so, then allowed back in to resume their studies. Teachers, administrators, and other school personnel do not leave these students unattended when this occurs. We remain on duty and teaching and learning go on, especially in the world we live in today with threats from North Korea and catastrophic natural disaster. Students are safeguarded through these evacuations and calamities by those at the school. Aside from the adopted curriculum, we prepare them for active shooter, shelter in place, etc. Classrooms are only one aspect of the learning environment, so please be mindful. We are working alongside our students during those scenarios. The time is already built into the law. Lastly, what is most upsetting is the misstating of facts included in the bill that says, again, while students may have already attended classes for a number of hours before being released to go home or removed from buildings, releasing students early or removing them from the buildings for an hour or two requires that makeup of a complete instructional day, as the loss of a portion of a day is the loss of one complete day. But I'm here to say this is absolutely false, and again, relying on our last 2 calendared school years as proof, the superintendent and the board used instructional hours to allow for all of the incidental occurrences that occur at our schools. You know, for the example that I used is, and it's one that I've been through as a teacher, that when we have a bomb scare, or, you know, actually the bomb calls, so it's a bomb evacuation because of a bomb threat, right? We take our kids out, we are there with our students, and that is an hour that I don't clock off. My salary doesn't stop for that hour. We are there with our students, and that I'm interpreting is the hour that will be somehow, you know, the quote unquote necessary to make up. What you think is instructional time being lost because we're outside could very well be another lesson taught by me because I don't leave them. So for me to have to take the kids at that hour that we are displaced outside for whatever situation, here I am going to be called back for another hour. So to me, it's not a makeup hour we're looking at. It would be an additional instructional hour for me because I was there at the original hour when we take our kids outside. So that I am very passionate about, you know, enough that I did voice my concerns, and that is the example I'm going to use to leave with you of what it would really look like when it impacts me, because I don't leave those students, you know, neither do our administrators or other personnel that are there, you know, to take into account. So where would all those makeup hours come from, you know, along with everything that our former senator included as to say who would be in charge of the hours and distributing them and accounting for those, you know, makeup hours. I have a problem with as well because it is not defined and I don't see them as makeup hours to begin with. So with that, I highly oppose this bill and urge you to, you know, table it or remove it or withdraw it immediately as the consequences are too dire to pursue. I also would like to add that coming here today, I have 30 teachers from my school site and 2 administrators signed written testimony that I've submitted and has been included in the record tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. And we're just going to go down the line and then we'll go back to the superintendent.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Maria Gutierrez. I'm the Vice Chair of the Guam Education Board. Our testimony will be together with the Superintendent of Education. Thank you.
Sir.
Afternoon, my name is Domingo Campo, and I am a science teacher at Estumbo Middle School. And Mr. Chair and the committee, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, this last-minute opportunity to voice my concern, which is a representation of also a lot of the teachers that I work with, not only at Estumbo Middle School, but also other schools, other middle schools. And I want to thank Mr. Klitsky and Ms. Uggan for giving the details and very detailed on the laws and everything. And we are opposed because again, that the simple notion that you could just take the number of days and divide it by, multiply by the number of hours is going to give you X amount of hours. That's not the case because what you have done is basically the passing of this bill to the 1,260 hours. Now we are required even lunchtime to give instruction, which is not the case. We do not give instruction during lunchtime because the kids are eating their meals and taking their break. But with passing of this law, then you will be giving a weapon for the parents saying, why is my son or daughter not given instruction during lunch, the 7 hours? But Mr. Chair, you mentioned that you'll be changing that from 7 hours to 5 hours. But that in itself, again, there's a lot of issues and things that can happen which does not directly translate from number of 180 days multiply X amount of hours. So we are opposed to this bill.
Okay, thank you. Joe, did you plan on speaking before I get the superintendent? Or we'll have the superintendent speak?
I'll just be very brief. So I just want to thank you for meeting with us on that day for the Guam Education Board work session. I believe I rise in support based off of your corrections and what you've noted. And I've also spoken to Sanjay about the corrections that you've made, and I believe that suffices. And Domingo, I have a feeling that the corrections that Senator San Agustin is making will address the concerns that you had, because they were similar in terms of the hours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get you last, Sanjay. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my testimony is within the same memo that you saw earlier. Notwithstanding the history of the law, which I appreciate that former Senator Kliski provided, as well as some of the information by the teachers as how they're interpreting it, the department and the letter that we received is supportive of the bill because we believe that the intent of it is to basically provide additional clarification. As we know, there was the original language for the 180 days, instructional days, and then during the year as we were anticipating FESPAC, there was a move to adjust this language in order to provide the flexibility needed to make adjustments, given that we were going to shorten the year, and that required us that the language gave us sufficient flexibility to work with the Guam Federation of Teachers to figure out how to operate and establish a calendar that was then approved by the board. So the numbers that you're using here were based on the numbers that were utilized in that discussion. Now, of course, we do support you providing additional clarification and correction because as we provided the hours to you, they're not exactly apples to apples. So I think what Mr. Ocampo was saying earlier was, there's a difference between instructional hours, and we do want to clarify. So I think we want to make sure there's no misinterpretation of that mathematics and how that was arrived at. So I think, as you heard Deputy Joe Sanchez and, Mr. Sharma, and I know the other team that worked together between the union and the administration sat down for a long time on calculating each minute and hour in order to establish our current calendar that we're using and have used for the past couple of years. So as we offer our support, I think our biggest concern was, given the way we have established our school calendars, we do see benefits in how we've arrived and agreed upon the existing calendars of the union, but also been able to use the flexibility to provide and make room for an additional opportunity for professional development for teachers, which was something that had been sought by the department for a number of years. So currently, we have a total of 9 professional development days, while maintaining the equivalent of the 180 instructional days as determined by the hours negotiated between the union and the administration. So if the legislation were in place today, if the bill were a law today, we would still be allowed to operate under our existing school calendars. Where there is a difference is how we account for any lost instructional time in school as a result of emergency situations that require schools to interrupt instructions or to send students home early. If I could clarify, the way we actually implement this, it's not actually the interruption of instruction. It actually only occurs when we send students home early. So I think the concern raised by Ms. Uggan about the, if you are out with your students during an emergency, response, we are not, and we don't intend to calculate that. I don't know that that was the intent of the bill, to calculate that as time that needed to be made up, because our concern would be that we are paying teachers for that time, and if we had to make up those hours where they are on the clock, that would translate into additional resources. But we do calculate the lost time based on when we end school earlier than scheduled. And so that situation, I think, is what you're trying to clarify with regard to what then is made up. And I think, so in the calculation and the reduction of the days into hours, we're looking at it from an operational standpoint. Will it work, and does it allow us flexibility to determine how best to implement any makeup time? And we believe we can work with the hours calculation. So if you've lost a couple of hours and we have to make a couple of hours up, we can determine how best to do so without having to identify an extra day in the calendar in order to make up that day. Now, I think it would probably behoove us to run through a number of different scenarios prior to passing the bill, just to ensure that it is operationally sufficient. But I think in our conversations with our management team, we do believe that we can make it work, and we just want to make sure that we are on the same page with regard to how instructional time is made up, should students be sent home early. And so for that reason, and working with you to ensure that we have the flexibility to address the instructional needs of our students, we offered our support for the bill and provided you that testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Sanjay Sharma. Sir.
Thank you. In regards to Bill 160, GFT agrees with the intent to change the number of days to the number of hours. The current practice is to offer children with 900 hours of instruction from kindergarten to 12th grade. The 1,260 hours listed for middle and high schools refer to the hours that a student is expected to be in school, inclusive of breaks, lunch, and fasting time. The 900 hours is specific to instructional time only. The intent of the bill should focus on the instructional hours and not the duration of the students in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Speaker, Senator Jalai, would you like to? Senator, you're good? I guess it's back to you.
Okay. So are you testifying that the bill as written is what you support? Not the changes that he mentioned earlier?
Inclusive of the changes he had made mention earlier of 900 hours from kinder to 12th grade.
All right, so they would be uniform, because the bill, just for everybody who's listening, the bill right now says 900 hours for elementary schools, 900 hours per year, and for middle and high schools, 1,260 hours per year, and you want to convert that to 900 hours per year. That's what this bill should read, you think? Yes, Superintendent? Okay.
I think, depending on how the language is corrected, we want to make sure that the distinction is made between, when we say 900 instructional hours, especially in the secondary level, these are the 900 instructional hours a teacher is expected to teach. So in the course of a single school day, that would equate to 5 hours of instruction for a teacher. But a student would get 6 hours of instruction on that same day because a teacher is, has their prep time and so forth. So I want to just make sure I'm looking at Joe because he's more of our mechanic on this. But I think we're talking about the same situation. It's just if you're looking at it from the standpoint of a teacher, they are teaching those 5 instructional hours during the day, but a student actually gets 6 per day. So determining how we want to,
yes.
How you want to incorporate that into the bill is going to be, offer our services to assist with that.
All right, so everybody agrees that the board should be the one to determine the calendar. There's no disagreement with that, and it's just a matter of, and the union agrees that if the board changes the calendar and extends it, as the superintendent described in his scenario, you get short 1 hour. They were sent home 1 hour early one day. The next day, if he added on an hour to that day, it's a wash for the union as to pay, things like that?
That would be up to the superintendent and his administration to determine how to make up that hour. The board can have policies adopted down the line to address issues like that as well.
Yeah. All right. After hearing the explanation by the superintendent and GFT and the deputy, do the teachers still disagree?
I would like to see the language written clearly because my understanding of the bill that I read included that example that said removing them from the buildings for an hour or two, meaning that I don't know what it means besides coming back in after that hour. And then it said requires the makeup of a complete instructional day, as the loss of a portion of a day is the loss of one complete day. That's the language that I read last night in the bill that I saw.
It's in the intent. I would recommend we delete that example from the intent, right?
Yes. The intent.
Okay.
So for me, I need clarity.
And
that
we should
not be
also clarify that the hours we're talking about then are instructional hours as opposed to hours to be at the school for any reason. And if we said, so we're converting 180 days are to be converted into equivalent instructional hours. Up on top, it's 180 instructional days. So the underlying portion in this bill that we're adding, the sentence that we're going to add, says the 180 instructional days are to be converted into equivalent hours. All right. Okay. All right. It makes sense to me if the union agrees that the board is going to be able to do that, and you've been doing that. It seems like this is consistent with what you've been doing. Have you been limited in converting the calendar in the way that you described in your letter, Mr. Superintendent? Were you able to add on just an hour, or you had to add on an extra day prior to this?
The practice has been to utilize makeup days. But of course, I think over the past 2 years, we've been operating in a more of a gray area, which I think is what we're trying to clarify. I think even, and I think that's what the point is that when you establish the equivalent of 180 instructional days and do not define that equivalent too clearly, we developed an operating practice, and I think as we've discussed that with the senator and the board, there was a request for more clarification, so we're happy to work on that clarification.
Well, then that's great, because I've heard them say that they like the way it's operating now, right, the teachers? Do you like the way the calendars are being adjusted?
Let's put it this way, that when it comes to the school calendar and the makeup days, the board, the administration, they have a big challenge in front of them, and us teachers, we try and do and support where we can. But again, the language that was provided in front of us, this was a straight forward saying that we are mandated to provide 1,260 hours, meaning that from this point forward, we are also going to be teaching during lunchtime. So of course, there was a concern. And Joe, thank you very much for the clarification. If the language was to be changed to reflect what is considered instructional hours, and then us teachers, the majority of us teachers would definitely support that.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez, you wanted to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Vice Speaker, and Mr. Castro. Just for the record, and I would like to acknowledge not only was he a former senator, but he was a director of education at what time, Mr. Kliski. And even as far back as the Territorial Board of Education, the board has always have a committee on school calendar committee, and has always been comprised with members from the Guam Federation of Teachers. And we have a good working relationship, and I know we're approaching the end of the 2-year calendar, that the calendar committee that will soon be formed to work on for the next 2 years. But yes, I'm just going to say Director Krisky, I'm more used to that, is the laws did state that the board shall set the school calendar. But we also work very closely with the GFT, Guam Federation of Teachers. So I just want to make that clear, that we don't include them in the calendar committee. Whether it goes down, whether all the teachers know about it, that's up to GFT to let them know. But Mr. Sharma has really been working very closely, and we had a good working relationship as far as whatever is in the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to remind everybody what I said earlier. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, a point of personal privilege, sir.
Yes, Senator.
I was also a teacher. Thank you.
Yes, and you're also a commander in the National Guard. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you what I mentioned earlier. When we were starting to develop the bill, the information that came to 1260, I did not draw this from the sky. I got this from DOE. And then when I sat with them, with the DOE management and the board, they said, yes, we did tell you 7 hour centers. I said, so what is the true hours? Because the bill was ready to draft. It's ready submitted, okay? It said it's really 5. I said, okay. When we have the public hearing, I will announce it that I will amend the bill to reflect the 5 hours. Now, going back to Senator Kliski, I'm full support of the Adequate Education Act. When I was on the board for 6 years as the chairman, I ran this toe-to-toe with everybody, even GFT. I had fun with them and everybody and the teachers. There are things that I wish we could actually support 100% in the legislature. That is providing all the books that every student should get. I would love to see that. I like to see technology come in place in the school, so we don't have to worry about books, go e-books, and it's renewed every year. I like to see the students get to school on time, because I'm finding out that on that part there, number 14, regular timely school bus transportation, DOE is following what DPW wants, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. I've already advised the board and the superintendent and everybody else, you set the schedule and you tell them what time you need to bring the kids. It is not for them to tell you when they'll pick up your students. And I know it's going to start changing, because I'm going to be asking that to change. And I'll be asking for every part here. And that's why I go after all this, because I support totally the 14 adequate education. We need to put more meat to it. Need to figure out a way, and Senator Klitzky knows where I'm coming from. When I go after something, I'll just keep going. I'll just look for him. He lives in Jigo just like me. Just drive down to his house, just, Senator, how do we fix this? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here for the students. I'm here for the teachers. It's about this, getting this right. The equivalence is only that. You do 5 hours of equivalence, just want to equate that. Because if I was to follow the example that Senator Klitzky presented, the 35 hours a week, there's your 7 hours a day. Okay? Because 7 divided by 5, or times 5, is 35 hours a week. All I'm saying is, you're really working only 5 hours, then let's just follow that. And then we just try to work that. So when you need to make up, the superintendent says this is the calendar, GFT is supportive of it, everybody's supportive of it, you work it, do the 5 hours. And I know that when you do a bomb scare, I know teachers are teaching out there. You're teaching them how to avoid getting hurt out there. Some don't, most do. But I'm here for you. That's what the bill was for, is to help the schools and make sure we fulfill the 14 points. Because this 14 points, not, as long as I'm senator and oversight chair, it's not going anywhere. It's got to get better. It's got to get stronger. We got to figure out how to fix the schools. And if we have no other testimony, Senator Klitzky, were you going to say something, sir?
I was just going to concur with your sentiments on the 14 points, Mr. Chairman. I think you really got something there. And while we're at it, maybe we could clean it up and get that Easter and Christmas out of it, because it just doesn't belong there. It's just not part of the scheme. We have a Board of Education. The Board of Education can deal with Easter and Christmas and make-up days and fractional days and all the rest of these things. The idea with the Every Child Act was just to kind of define the edges of the road and let the Board of Education and the superintendent drive the car down the road. So maybe you could clean up that point number 13, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator. As a matter of fact, because it's brought up at the public hearing, it makes it germane. And if legal, I don't know, Senator tonight probably saying, no, it doesn't. I will ask legal, and if they say we can add it on to this bill, then we'll add it on. But when we do make the amendments to the bill, I'll send it to the superintendent, to GFT, and I would ask them to make sure it goes out to all the teachers. So it's not a hidden agenda, okay? I don't like anything hidden. I like it all showing. But Senator Chalai would like to ask you, Senator Klitzky, some question. You're both lawyers, so you know it'll work.
Well, I want to commend you first on the 14 points. Senator Klitzky is the author of this. For those who don't know, he authored that whole legislation. It's a bit.
Thank you.
And but in your testimony, you cited a court case, GFT versus DOE versus Civil Service Commission.
Yes.
And in there, you highlighted the part that says teachers must fulfill at least 180 instructional days each school year and approximately 35 duty hours per week.
Yes.
So if we amended this bill as, it's going to be 25 instructional hours per week. Is that an issue?
I beg your pardon, did you say so?
The bill proposes 180 instructional days would be converted into 25 instructional hours per week. Is that an issue?
Well, it is for me, because I don't see that that's something that should be done here. I think it should be done there or at the Board of Education
No, I mean,
level.
in this court case, 35 duty hours per
Yeah.
week it requires versus 25 instructional hours. They're using
Okay.
different terms, duty hours, instructional hours.
Exactly, exactly. And that was the point that I made at the beginning of my testimony, that these are not, we're talking hours, but hours mean different things in different contexts. And the court case, that's a Guam Supreme Court case that finally determined that teachers were not on furlough during that 2 weeks, and it uses their 35 hours as duty hours. Well, if you're a teacher and school runs from, say, 9 until 4, you show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and you go home at 4 in the afternoon, that's 7 hours. That doesn't mean 7 hours that you're in the classroom. So instructional hours and duty hours are not the same thing. And then I threw in this part about the 2080 just to make it even more complicated. But
All right. So,
and I think that was the problem that arose after the fix caused by the South Pacific Games, because I remember there was a lot of labor strife then, because there was no clear thinking about the difference between instructional hours and duty hours. So the 35 hours in that Supreme Court case is the product of the briefing of the attorneys, the counsel for the board, counsel for GFT, et cetera. And I interpret it as meaning that a teacher's on campus for 35 hours a week, not that a teacher's in the classroom for 35 hours a week. And once again, to go back and beat the horse that's almost dead here, but the Board of Education has the ability to set the calendar and has the ability to do all these other things, has a panel of experts on board, and probably is in a very good position to take a standard like 180 days and the kind of enabling legislation that I propose and make this all come out even so that everybody's happy. I did mention in here that there is an exclusive bargaining agent for the teachers. When you're dealing with the teachers, more than likely it should be a collaborative process, which is what I've heard tonight. So that's why I kind of facetiously talked about, multiplying by 60 one more time. You can take it right on down to the second. But why would you want to? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, so Mr. Superintendent, do you then think that, is the 35 duty hours still a requirement? Is that like a requirement because of the case or something else?
I'd like to go and review that particular section there. So, but it is important to make that distinction between the duty day, which is which we said in our negotiating through the collective bargaining agreement, certain parameters, as well as the instructional hours that are required. So, but I would be happy to look at that section.
Could you
closely.
please keep us informed as to what you determine? I'm curious whether that's even mandated or it's flexible. But it looks like you're looking for a minimum 25 instructional hours. I get that part. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The committee will continue to receive testimonies for the next few days by Tuesday. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com. My office is located at the Rand Care Building, second floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Ladies and gentlemen, this now concludes the public hearing on Bill 160-34. Thank you. It is now 7:23, and have a good night. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.